Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the top 10 teams, who they're playing this upcoming weekend, and what do we need to see from them to feel a little bit more confident or continue the confidence level that we already have in them. But let's get into some questions heading into week 4. There are a number of questions that I'm going to have likely into tomorrow. I'll be totally honest with you, likely to see a couple more tomorrow, but let's jump into these today. And I think the biggest one I have is who has the biggest moment this upcoming weekend. There are a couple of big time games, and whenever you have the playoff involved, especially with a 12 team, there's going to be a number of games that have a lot of importance on them. And a lot of teams are going to be coming into that week saying, we got to get this win. If we get this win, then it kickstarts us and probably puts us in the driver's seat to make one of those playoff spots. And I think Tennessee's right at the top of that list. They're going into OU, a chance to open the SEC season and get all of that hype that has been on them, make it proven correct. Make everyone look like a genius for putting you at 6 and make everyone that was questioning you at 6 look dumb. That's the ultimate goal on Saturday. And I think when if you were able to do that, I think it opens so many doors. It gives you so much confidence about what you can be going forward. It shows you that you can go into a road environment and get a big time win. And also, the rest of the schedule is pretty manageable. If you talk about beating OU and then moving forward, obviously Georgia, Alabama down the road, no doubt about it, those are going to be very difficult, but you could probably lose those and still make it to the playoffs. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this team, but this is a game where I think I've been circling it for quite some time, and now Tennessee's got to execute on Saturday. But more than anyone else, I think this weekend's about Michigan. I think it's more about Michigan than really anyone else in the entire country, because Michigan is essentially lost right now. There are so many people that I've seen essentially bury Michigan, say this season's a loss. Sharon Moore is going to be fired in a couple of years anyway, and they'll just have to move forward after all of this. This is still a good team. This is still a team that has a lot of ability. This is still a team that now with Alex Orji at quarterback has a very real, very aligned identity. I was trying to look for the word. A very normal, a Michigan identity for the first time in the first couple of weeks. And I think it's one of those things that they have so much ability to, in one weekend, in one win, change all of the impressions about them early on in the season, that if they can win this one, all of the things change. It's no longer about, what can Michigan do? Can they even compete with Ohio State and Oregon? It becomes maybe Michigan is a dark horse playoff team. Maybe they're a team that can give Oregon problems. Maybe they're a team that at the end of the year is going to be looking good enough to possibly challenge Ohio State. So everything can change for Michigan this upcoming week. And then obviously on the other side you have OU and USC, huge weekends for them as well. I just think on the other side you have a little bit more on the table for those two opponents. And then NC State could be on this list as well. USF against Miami is absolutely a huge spot, but more than anyone, I do think Michigan has as much pressure and as big of a moment for them this weekend as really anyone in the country. And then we got to get into where I was right and wrong this season, because at least so far, I'm going to hold my breath on a couple of different takes that I've had, because not necessarily fully confident to throw them in the trash quite yet, but I was wrong about Florida State. I'll say that with my chest. This team is bad. There's no other way to put it. This is a team that came into the season, I felt like a lot of things were going to come into place. I felt like it was going to take them a little bit of time to get things rolling, but I thought the transfers they had were just a little bit better than they are. Just frankly, I thought DJ was going to be able to play a little bit better. I definitely thought this run game and O-line was going to be a ton better. I thought the defense was going to play better in the first couple of weeks. Now, they feel like they've kind of found themselves defensively a little bit, but doesn't necessarily matter at this point. You've already lost 3 games, and a lot of people are asking a lot of questions around that team. I was also wrong about the LSU and USC defenses, and it wasn't necessarily about, I think both of them are going to be terrible or I think they're not going to make any progress. It was just if you told me that one of them was going to make big-time progress and one of them was going to be making, minimal progress but taking small steps forward, I probably would have flipped the teams. I'll be totally honest with you. And I've said that a number of times the last little bit and very much apologize to USC fans for ever doubting this team. But it's one of those things that I just thought LSU had more guys. I thought they had more of a personnel to possibly get a really good defense on the field quicker than USC could. That was not the case. Deonton Lynn's done an incredible job early on there, and I think they have every ability to make some noise going forward, and especially this weekend against Michigan like we talked about. And then I was a little bit wrong about Florida. I wasn't necessarily, singing Florida's praises or saying they were going to compete for the SEC, but it felt like there was a quiet confidence around Gainesville that no one else felt. That everyone was kind of looking at them as a team that was going to go 4-8 or 5-7 and be kind of an afterthought. but everyone in that program felt very confident in what they could do. So I kind of got on. I got a little bit caught up in that moment. But overall, I think it's one of those things that maybe they were wrong in that building. Maybe they were misguided. Maybe I was misguided. But I do think it's a team that there's really no other way to put it. This team is all over the place, and I think although there's been a little bit of talk around Billy Napier sticking around, which we'll likely get into tomorrow, it's a team that's all over the place, and I can't find an answer for them right now. And then you have Cam Ward. I feel really good about saying I was right about this one. Cam Ward is one of those guys that, frankly, a lot of people were singing his praises, so I'm not going to take too much of a victory lap here. But I do think it was one of those things that a lot of people questioned. A kid coming from Washington State who came from Incarnate Word, being able to step up on that stage immediately and lead a Florida team lead a Miami team the way that he did. I think when he was walking into that Florida game, I was worried. I picked Florida in that game because I was worried about them being able to click that quickly. It's happened very quickly. Cam Ward is absolutely incredible and one of those guys that has totally changed the complexion of Miami football pretty much overnight. Really incredible player and one of those guys that every time you turn on your TV and you see him playing, it's always really fun to watch. And then I'm talking about Oklahoma State. This is a team that has played really good football thus far, so it's not necessarily about them being good or bad. It's just the way they go about things. I didn't know this. I felt like Ollie Gordon was going to take a little bit of a step back this year, not because he wasn't talented, not because they didn't have the O-line, or at least I thought they didn't have I thought they had the O-line. It was just because I think a lot of teams were going to key on it. I think they were going to force Alan Bowman to beat them, and frankly, I think that's likely what teams are going to continue to do until Alan Bowman proves it, likely this weekend against Utah. So it's one of those things that you felt like Ollie Gordon was going to take a little bit of a step back this year. Now, he's taken quite the step back, and this offensive line has a ton of things to figure out, but overall, I think it's one of those things that you knew Oklahoma State had to be a little bit different this year, and obviously that was the case. And then what's the most another question here? What's the most important game in the CFP race? And I think it might just start with the Oklahoma State team. They host Utah this upcoming weekend. And frankly, that just might be the game for the conference more than anything else. I think this might be the game that we look back on and say that was what decided it. That was what sent Oklahoma State or sent Utah over that other team to the Big 12 championship in Arlington. And it's a really, really fun game. I think you look at Utah and likely Cam Rising will be back for this game, so great news for Utah. And you have the first conference game, so much stuff going into it that I think whoever wins this game is very much in a place where they can make some real noise in the CFP race, and frankly, they might be one of the teams that has the best odds to make the CFP moving forward if they were to win this game. And then you got a couple other games. I think the Miami USF game is absolutely huge, particularly for USF. Obviously, for Miami, they take care of business in the ACC. They're more than fine. But USF gets this win. That is a massive feather in the cap. And a lot of Group of 5 teams have been beating Power 4 teams. This would take the cake by a mile. This would be the biggest win that a Group of 5 team has had over a Power 4 team this year, and USF would be in a position where they do have a loss on the schedule, but they took Alabama to 4 quarters for them to beat them, and then Miami, they were able to beat at home. This would be a team you'd have to talk about very, very seriously about possibly making the playoff. And then you got Tennessee OU, obviously will play a part, but I think both those teams could win that game and then take a step back throughout the rest of the season and then just get lost in the shuffle that is the SEC. But my other question is, what conference race will be impacted the most this upcoming weekend? And I think there's a number of different debates here where we've talked about the ACC a little bit here with a number of the games, NC State, Clemson, Louisville Tech, all of the games that are going on this weekend. But then you have a couple others in the SEC. You have Tennessee OU, you have Auburn I apologize. You have Auburn, Arkansas. You have a ton more that could just be kind of a blip on the radar, but maybe this is the weekend where a lot of things go crazy. Maybe Alabama struggle, or Alabama's not playing. Maybe Ole Miss struggles. Maybe Texas struggles. Maybe there's people that give you a little bit of opening to see maybe this race is a little bit different than we thought it was going into this week. And then you got the Big Ten. I think they have USC Michigan is the main event, but you also have another ranked matchup with Illinois Nebraska on Friday. We'll break that one down tomorrow. And then you have Rutgers against Virginia Tech. You have UCLA against LSU. A couple of huge out-of-conference games that if your teams come out on the right side, it really does benefit you, especially that UCLA team. And then if they come out on the wrong side, then maybe the Big Ten doesn't have quite as much power going forward, and maybe those teams in particular are out of any shot to compete for the Big Ten. UCLA is probably already out, if I'm being honest. But my pick would be the Big 12. We talked about the Oklahoma State-Utah game, but that's not it. I mean, Kansas State going up to BYU is absolutely huge, could flip things on its head. Baylor going to Colorado is a meeting of two teams that have been playing pretty good football right about now, and whoever wins that one is going to have a lot of confidence moving forward. You have Kansas going to West Virginia, a game where both these teams very badly need to bounce back after they very much could be buried this upcoming weekend. So a lot of stuff happening in the Big 12 that I think we're going to be talking about in Week 14 that I think in these other conferences we could be talking about these games, but not nearly in the same way that we're talking about the Big 12. And then finally, how do we gauge who's good and who's not right about now? It is such a hard thing every single year to figure out who the top teams in the country are and who are, not so good that we thought were going to be good early on in the season, because some teams haven't played big time opponents, some teams just haven't gotten to their full form yet, and that's obviously a thing that's going to matter as you move forward in the season. I feel pretty confident in a couple of teams. I think Texas probably leads that list. You have to feel really confident in the Longhorns right now. Miami, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and many others have been playing really clean football. They've been taking care of business the exact way that they should, and I have really no reason to doubt who they are as a team, at least as of right now. Obviously, that stuff can change in a hurry, but as of right now, I think those are the teams that are absolutely incredible and have been playing that way early on. And then you have a couple of teams that have just shown some openings. I think Penn State is one of those teams. UGA is one of those teams against Kentucky. Clemson is one of those teams absolutely against UGA. So you have these openings. I think these are teams that are still very good, still have every ability to compete for a CFP spot and maybe compete for a title down the road, but they gave you a little bit. They gave you a little bit of blood in the water, and we'll see what happens from here, and it's really interesting to figure out just how good this team is, especially that Clemson team. It's incredibly hard to figure that out. Penn State's a little bit harder as well, but UGA I feel pretty confident is a great team. I'm not going to necessarily sell my stock on UGA by any means, but it's definitely a team that gave all the SEC teams that they play just a little bit of an opening last week, and we'll see what happens from here on forward. But the good news for us is conference play is coming up, and that's the great news. We're going to be able to see exactly what these teams are against the other great teams that we've been talking about. So we'll be able to see Ole Miss against LSU. We'll be able to see Georgia against Texas, and we'll figure out just how good these teams are and what the hierarchy is in these different conferences. Such a fun thing to do every single year, but right around this time of year, you're looking at the screen, you're trying to say, I know this Ole Miss team is good. I've seen them play really clean, really crisp football, but then you say, but they're playing Georgia Southern, but they're playing Wake Forest, but they're playing certain teams. I think the biggest thing is just trust your eyes. All of you have watched the sport a lot. All of you understand the sport. Trust what you're watching. Ole Miss has looked incredibly clean through a couple of weeks. I understand they're not necessarily elite opponents that they're playing. They've been incredibly crisp. Tennessee, the exact same way. At Texas, the exact same way. They've been doing things the exact way that you want them to do it. And it's one of those things that it is a big deal, being this crisp early on, especially with all of the transfer portal, all of the changes that have been going on. Being a team that is standing on 2 feet this early in the season means a lot. So Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, all of these other teams that have played really crisp football, it's not necessarily, they haven't played the big-time opponents, and obviously they have plenty more to prove, but the reality is they've been doing exactly what they expected them to do, and I have no reason to believe they're not good teams. So it's always a hard thing to figure out right around this time of year, but we're about to figure out in a hurry in the next couple of weeks as conference play gets underway. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have awesome people doing great work across every single sport you could want. So anything in the world of sports that you need, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and we will be back tomorrow for more Week 4 breakdowns.